Let's go ahead and get started. Hebrews chapter number 3, verses. And we're going to read from verse number 1 to verse number 6. It says, "Wherefore, holy brethren, partakers of the heavenly calling, consider the apostle and high priest of our profession, Christ Jesus, who was faithful to him that appointed him, as also Moses was faithful in all of his house. For this man was counted worthy of more glory than Moses, inasmuch as he who hath builded the house hath more honor than the house. For every house is builded by some man, but he that built all things is God. For Moses verily was faithful in all his house as a servant for a testimony of those things which for those things which were to be spoken after. But Christ is a son over his own house, whose house are we, if we hold fast the confidence and the rejoicing of the hope firm until the end." Now, as we go through, I think it's good as we go through this that we do just a little bit of review. And actually, as we start off chapter 3, it begs us for that review. When it starts out with wherefore, could be wherefore, therefore, is basically kind of like a preacher, or somebody saying, I said all that to say this. So it causes us to have to look back for just a little review. And it's saying what we've understood so far is that Jesus has been determined to be better than the angels from chapters 1 and chapter 2. This was important for the audience. For us, as I was studying this out and I was thinking about how to do this stuff, and I'm understanding, who the audience is. Of course, we don't know who the author is, and I love that. I think that's great. For me, it's just perfect symbolism of how you can't box God up. Just whenever you think, everybody that done everything, no, I'm going to put something in here and I ain't going to tell you who done it, but it's going to be great. And I love that. I love how it doesn't, we can't fit him into our framework. And he just proves it by not letting us know who the author of that is. But it was important for this whoever this author is in writing Hebrews because of what they were dealing with. So we know that he's writing to Jews, and what has happened is there has been a time whenever these Jews have heard the word. Many of them have believed, many of them have trusted. Some of them have believed or have heard but have not trusted. He's speaking to a number of different groups, and it's important knowing that as we read through this. What has happened is they've heard and they've trusted, but there's been this pull back into the old way. There's been this pull back into Judaism. They're surrounded by some pagan religions, and a lot of these religions, even some Christians, are believing how important that angels are. There were some that even believed that Christ was just an angel. So it is important for the audience to understand that this man who came, the builder of the house, he came in the name of God. He was better than the angels. It was important for them. Just a history. I know for us and for those, that are in here tonight, we're not into the angel worship, but to understand and get full context of the word, that's why we're talking about that. He said he's better than the angels. Said he is the captain of our salvation, that he is the sanctifier. And all of this can be found in the first 2 chapters. Then he gets over and he starts calling them. He says, "Wherefore, holy brethren." There are those that believe that whenever he calls brethren, just because he says brethren in this book, that everyone in this book, all of his audience is saved. The distinction is made here that clearly it must not be, because he has made the distinction of holy brethren. He's calling them the partakers of the heavenly calling. He's making that distinction. There's something different about you. You're the ones that believe. You're the ones that have trusted. You're the ones that have shown. He calls them partakers of the heavenly calling. What would that mean? What does that mean? For them, when they're hearing this, what are they hearing? How are they receiving that? What does it mean to be part of that heavenly calling? Something that was far different. It was that life that glorifies God through Jesus. That heavenly calling to pray, that heavenly calling of the Great Commission to go and make disciples. Those are the things. He's like, you're part of those. You're part of that heavenly calling. Christ came to create the church and to make the church, to establish the church. Your part of your calling is to help to just keep that going, to make disciples, to teach, to live that life where others look inside on what you're doing and they're like, what is different? How is this operating in you? And that's the heavenly calling. At work, there's a couple of boards that are up, and from time to time I like to go through and I'll write little things on there. Above it, kind of the topic, if you will, is I've got written up there, consider this. And I'll go and I'll just write, something that makes sense to me, something that is, it's meant to provoke thought. It's meant to get you to stop and think, wow, heard a guy say, are we putting the wrong price tags on the wrong things of our life? Like, what does that mean? Well, basically what that means, are we putting too much value into things that really don't matter? So it's things like that. What's currently up there now at work, I put this up a few days ago, says your value is not determined by how hard you work, but by how hard you are to replace. When you think about that, when you consider that, it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? On the workplace, it's not hard to find somebody to do a single job. Those can be replaced pretty easily. But when you have those people that you can move around, those people that are there all the time, that show up, that do their job well, that own their area, those people are hard to replace. And it's not because necessarily that they just work hard, it's their value from what they do. The same kind of idea is given to us next in this. Wherefore, holy brethren, partakers of the heavenly calling, consider the apostle and the high priest of our profession, Jesus Christ. This word consider, this is not something flighty. This is not something that we just take a glance at. It's not something just, oh yeah, that's like kind of cool, This is more of the, when you see, I've never been in an art gallery, but you'll see, when they have them, people will be standing there and they'll just be staring at it. Just be looking into it, trying to get an understanding for what was going on in this painter's mind. What was their emotions? What was going on in their life? What were they trying to depict? A picture is worth 1,000 words, right? And they're trying to just drain all of that from just looking into this. The same thing is the same idea is given to us here when he says, consider. Basically, he's saying, consider Christ, consider Jesus Christ, consider Him as the apostle. That word apostle is basically like the ambassador. For us, that's probably, to relate it to our culture now, it'd be like an ambassador. And that ambassador, for our understanding, he was sent from God. He was sent from God with God's authority. An ambassador has the authority for whoever sent them, as well as having in mind with pursuing their agenda. He was our ambassador. He was the high priest of our profession. And our confession is probably a better word. It's the high priest at whom we go to. It's the one that we run to. Once again, in this culture, when you're dealing with that priestlyhood, this is what they hear. For us, it would sound, it doesn't resonate as much because there's churches everywhere. Most of us come from a place where you probably had to pass 10 churches just to get to yours. So that type of Aaronic type of priest, we don't really know much. But that's what he's saying is, He is your high priest. He's the one now that we run to. He's the one that we go to. He is the mediator. It says, consider Jesus, and then he highlights him with Moses. He said, who was faithful, in verse number 2, was faithful to him, who appointed him, as also Moses was faithful in all of his house. In Hebrews chapter 10, verse 10, it says, by which we are all sanctified. That means made holy. We are made holy through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once and for all. Once you've received Christ, you are made holy. In verse 14 it says, for by one offering He hath perfected forever them that are made holy. In verse 17, and their sins and iniquities He will remember no more. Where no remission there is no more offering for sin. Why? Because there was no sin. Positionally, we are holy, we are set apart, pure, positionally as Christians and of that partakers of that heavenly calling. As he goes in and he begins to talk to Moses, when you consider it and you think about it and you consider the audience, and you can really get a true wonderful feel of how delicately that the Holy Spirit had the writer to put these things down. You ever consider, whenever you're going to write somebody something, right, and you kind of know a little bit about them, and I probably need to change this word, or I probably, I can change it over for this slang, depending on who your audience is, determines about how you speak, how you send that text, whether they'll get it, understand it or not. So the Holy Spirit here is recognizing that audience has taken Moses and just adores him. And rightfully so in the Jewish mind. This was the man who was called out. This was the man who took Egypt out. This was the man that raised a stick over the Red Sea. This was the man that wrote the entire Pentateuch. This was the man that gave the laws, that gave the rites, that gave the rituals for the temple. This was the man. Basically, every way that we're living now is due to this man. Now, the writer is understanding, he's getting ready to know, he's getting ready to talk about Moses. And he mentions him so wonderfully. He said, who was faithful to him that appointed him, as also Moses was faithful. So the comparison immediately is how that they were both faithful in what they done. Before taking up Jesus to be superior to Moses, he notices the resemblance before them first. At the end of verse number 1, Jesus who was faithful to him that appointed him. So Jesus was faithful in the things that he was appointed. In John 6:38 it says, for I came down from heaven, this is Jesus talking, not to do my own will, but the will of him that sent me. In John 7:18 it says that he that speaketh of himself seeketh his own glory, but he that seeketh his glory that sent me. The same is true. No righteousness or unrighteousness is in him. In John 8, verse 29, and he that sent me is with me. The Father hath not left me alone, for I do all those things that please him. In John 17, for I have finished the work which thou gavest me to do. In verse 2, Moses also was faithful in his house. So the Holy Spirit tactfully, delicately brings these two together to show their similarities before he begins to discuss their differences. And Jesus was placed in a major emphasis with Moses. Then he took the children of Israel, Moses, out of the land, and he done all of these wonderful and great things. He talks about our household. Whose household? Moses was faithful in all of his house. That house was, in this time for Moses, it was the household of Israel, the household of David. We know that now that we are the household of God. But Moses in his time, in verse number 5, it says that he was a servant that as well as a steward. He said he was a steward. In Corinthians, it's moreover, brethren, is required in stewards that he be found faithful. A faithful steward was one who doesn't own the house, but he manages the house for the owner. Moses was in charge of that management. He was in charge of dispensing the facts and things that God had committed to his trust to the people. Verse 2, Christ was faithful in his house. Whose is Christ's household? We are. Ephesians 2:9, now therefore you are no more strangers and sojourners, but fellow citizens with the saints of the household of God, who is the church. In 1 Peter 2:4, to whom coming is unto a living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of God, precious. Ye also, as living stones, are built up a spiritual house. So we understand that we are the household of God. And that is what he's saying. Christ is greater because he was the Son, because he was the builder of the house. For every house, in verse number 4, for every house is builded by some man, but he that built all things is God. We are his house, and Jesus was faithful to the Father. I don't think that we've truly begun to discover what God can do through someone who is willing to be totally faithful. But the difference for them comes in verse number 3. For this man was counted worthy of more glory, inasmuch as he who hath built the house has more honor than the house. Moses was faithful, but he's a piece of the house. Jesus made the house. Moses was part of the house. Jesus made the house. Moses was a servant, Jesus was the son. In John 8:25 it says, yes, and the servant abideth not in the house forever, but the son abideth. In other words, there's a certain ranking for the son, and it's above the one who's in the house, right? He's the inheritor. He's the one that built it. He's the one that made it. Whenever you go and you look at something, you're like, man, this is a beautiful place. Who built it? That's always the thing. Where does the greater honor go is to the one who has built the house. Verse number 5, he was a faithful minister. He was a faithful servant. He was faithful, obedient, ministering, caring servant, and he was God's steward. In Exodus chapter number 40, 8 times it refers to Moses as an obedience to all that God commanded him. Between chapters 35 and 40, there are 22 times it refers to Moses' faithfulness to obey all that God commanded him. And did you notice? He didn't compare to Moses' failures. We recognize that Moses was a murderer. We recognize that whenever they were going through the wilderness, there were many times where Moses was like, I don't know why you give me these people. These folks is crazy. He argued with God. He said, I don't want to go talk. I can't talk. I'm slow to speak. There are many failures that we could land, but he did not mention him with the failures of Moses. When I want to try to make myself look good, I will compare myself to how somebody else is not as good as I am. But if you want to show how supreme and how awesome you are, then you compare yourself to their victories. How does a person become, there's been a lot of, talk here lately about the GOATs, the greatest of all times, talking about it in basketball, talking about it in football. The only way that you can become the greatest of all time is whenever your achievements are far beyond those who have been before you. It's comparing the victories. The Holy Spirit guides this author to do the same thing, comparing the victories of these two men. So Moses was a servant, and this was only but a shadow of his calling. Hebrews 10:1 says, for the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never with those sacrifices which they offered year by year continually make those who come to it perfect. The law can't do it. It was a shadow of the things to come. In verse number 6, it says, but Christ as a son over his own house of whom we are. This is what is known as the sanctuary. When you think about that term in and of itself, we've heard it probably mentioned a lot of time in the news, and it refers more to a sanctuary state or a sanctuary city. But that sanctuary, it is that place of where you find refuge. It is that safe place, right? This is called our sanctuary. We worship in here. This should be a safe place for worship. It is not necessarily the building that is the house. It is what is done inside of this that makes it the sanctuary. Last Wednesday, I was coming to church and had no idea why. But it was one of those times of where it's like I just got angry. I was just mad that the sky was blue, I was, and I couldn't, and it wasn't anything that happened. I was just like, golly, just found I don't know what it was. And I remember thinking clearly to myself, I just got to get to church. If I can just get to church. And it wasn't a matter of getting into the building. It was a matter of getting around the people. It wouldn't have mattered if we was meeting at Granny's kitchen. It had no place as far as the location. It was the people that I knew that were going to be there. It was the atmosphere that is encouraged to be here, of one of love, of one without prejudice, of one of where you can come and be vulnerable, of knowing that that's what makes this the sanctuary. Christ as a son over his own house, whose house we are, if we hold fast the confidence and the rejoicing of the hope firm until the end. when I first read through this, I got to be honest with you, it confused me. And I'm like, if we hold fast, it says we're His house, if we hold fast until the end. I'm like, man, this just didn't line up with other Scripture, you know. This just didn't line up with the once saved, always saved. Because as I'm reading this is telling me there's something that I have to do. It's conditional, right? The idea here is the way that this is being done is, here is how, number one, that you recognize those that are of the household. Because they hold fast with confidence for that hope to the end. They're rejoicing in that hope to the end. Do you remember there were many disciples asked Jesus, like, man, there was some guys that's with us, but they ain't here no more. He's like, that's how you know that they were never with us. It's not, and we can take that, we in of our own selves, sometimes we want to get righteous. Even in the last few years of whenever our churches come together, and there were some that come, some that stayed, and some that left. We want to say, well, they were never with us. That's not what that means. There are times where people are going to be called to go into different churches, to do different things for different ministries, and for whatever reason, God is moving them. I hope it doesn't mean, that you're lost if you've left a particular church, because this would really be like the third church that I've been a member of. And I don't think that I'm lost. So it can't be just that one place, that one location. And it's something that we have to recognize. When there's a disagreement, there's a falling out, who knows why? All of the ins and outs and everything that goes on with personalities, with annoyances, with prejudices, or whatever it is. Whatever God may do, however He may use them. That doesn't necessarily mean that the people that have left are lost. What He is saying is that you want to look into the life of someone that has lived the life. When you can see and you can watch that person and they've held on to their hope. They've held on fast. When you've watched them go through pains, when you've watched them go through struggles, when you've watched them deal with people at work, when you've watched them lose folks at home, and they've maintained that confidence and that hope, those are the ones that are of the household. It's just as easy for us to flip it and look it into ourselves. Whenever I go through times, where is the first place that I land? Evaluate to see if you are in the household of faith, right? When those times hit within our own lives, what do we do? Where's the first place do we run? Do we flip open the screen? Do we open up a bottle? Where's the first place? Check yourself. Make sure you are in the household of faith. There are many things that as this come up, that I thought, how does this flesh out? What does this look like, in the life of a Christian whenever they're going through things? So I had a talk with some people at work. I'm trying to find that. Yeah, here it is. So what I done was I had a few things within my own mind of what does this look like? And for me, it ranged from a couple of different things. There was a time where I started to learn how to play golf. Was getting kind of good, and then got real bad. And I got real mad. And I was playing one time and got pretty reckless with the golf cart. Jacked it up bad, running into another golf cart. I mean, messed it up really bad, right? Went right on up, parked it right outside the clubhouse where nobody could see, and jetted, right? Well, the next week, we were having a revival at church. And the first thing the man got up, Sunday morning, he said, here, we're going to have revival. He's like, but there's some things that some of y'all's got to get taken care of before we can have it. I was like, God, do you work at that golf course? And I thought, man, I've got to go tell. Now I've got to go on up to it. You know what I mean? Clearly we're not going to get it. He's standing all over me, and we're not going to miss revival because I missed doing what I was supposed to do. Somebody else miss out, but I'm going. You know what I mean? And I remember thinking the whole day, I've got to go tell these people. Now, to back it up just a little bit, I had gone back since then and played golf there, and this cart is sitting in front of the clubhouse with a $1,000 reward for anybody that knows what happened to it. For real. And I just like, man, I hope you find out who done that, dog. So I've been back up there, and now I know I gotta go tell him. I got to go tell him.
all day, Monday, all day long. I just stayed tore up, rehearsing what I was going to say. How's this going to go? What's this going to be like, Finally get the courage, go up there, and he's not there. The owner's not there. And I'm like, God, dog it, I've got to go through this all tomorrow too, because I got to get this off of me, So I go back the next day, and he's there, and I explained to him, I was like, sir, I said, I want to apologize. I said, I know what happened to your golf cart. I said, it was on me. I said, got out on the course, I lost my temper. I said, and I run into the back of another golf cart. I said, I apologize. Whatever it costs to replace this or fix this, please let me know and I'll take care of it. He looked at me and he said, son, that's why there's grace. He said, don't you worry about that golf cart. I said, Lord God, are you serious? And do you know that this is no lie? Every time that I went back to that course from that time on, he would not let me pay. He said, go ahead. We'd go shoot 9 and come back through, get a hot dog, get a whatever. He's like, go ahead. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Amazing. Yes, it was truly, genuinely. I'm like, you got to be kidding. But for me, that is one of those times where, I was faced with some fear, man. I didn't know what this was going to, I know it's going to cost. I don't know how much it costs to fix it, but I know he's willing to pay $1,000 to anybody that knew. So I'm like, man, I got to be $1,000 into this. And the last time I looked, I didn't have $1,000 free dollars, to just be handing out to try to make my wrongs right. But that grace showed up. And that confidence and my hope in Him, and it was met with grace. But there's so much that was in this, and I knew that I would never be able to do it justice. So I began to ask some others at work, when in those times, these are saintly folks, in those times where you've had to hold fast, where confusion, where fear has gripped your life, and you've had to hold fast to some hope, if you don't mind, will you tell me about those times? Will you help me understand what's going through? There was one lady that I spoke to. She had been married, had a child. I'll try to speed this up. She had a child, got divorced 11 years in between the next marriage. There was another child. For the whole time, for those 11 years, she's like, God, I need a man. My children need a father. She's going to church, faithful in church, met this guy, fell in love, got married, worked in the church, worked in the kitchen, was there every time the doors was open. But behind closed doors, it was a whole different world. This guy was abusive in all the ways imaginable, and eventually cost them their marriage. He moved out. They started going to some counseling. On the day that he was going on their wedding anniversary, when things were looking great, she finds out from one of her children that the entire time he was abusive to her, he was also abusive to them. Something she had no idea that was even going on. Every time a bruise would show up, a cut would show up, I got it at school, I wrecked my bike, that kind of thing. All of this was going on the entire time. Now that child suffers. It's been over 10 years since that marriage was dissolved, and now that child suffers from PTSD from what's happened. And his main struggle, as she spoke to me, his main struggle about getting into church is he can't get past, why did God allow this? And I'm listening, and I'm talking to this mom, and I'm thinking, why? Why did you keep trusting? I'm asking her, why did you keep trusting? What is it that kept you in church? Why did you end up, going back? She said she got out of it because she was ashamed, and then she went back to church. Amazing statement. She landed on the place. She's like, I did. She said, I questioned everything. It's like, God, how did I miss it? Where were the flags? How did I not see them? Questioning the whole time. She said, I landed in the place of, why not me? Why would I not be the one? It's happening in other places. Why should I be the one that's absent from the things that strike this world? Just because I'm saved, it's not going to strike me. She said, the radar was wide open. I was trying to find everything. She said, and I didn't see it. And to this day, I don't have great answers for it. There was another lady who said she was raising her granddaughter from the time she was 9 till she was 15. At 15, she decided she'd had enough of the rules and regulations, and she bounced. She went back to her mom's house, Her mom just allowed her to run and do whatever. Broke this lady's heart and has yet to speak to her from this entire time. Been 4 or 5 years since she spoke to her. She said, and she said, she was the only granddaughter. She said, I loved her. She said, every day that whenever I got home from work, said she would meet me at the car. And she would walk me into the house and we would talk about the day or we'd just cut, whatever. She said, for months, whenever I would get home, I'd have to sit in that car and wait till my husband got home because I couldn't walk up through there by myself. She said, I still to this day, she said, I'm not stopped. She said, I still pray for her. She said, and I still hope to see her. She said, there's still times whenever we're in the sanctuary, whenever the singing's done and the preacher's up, and we're all listening and I hear that door crack behind me. She said, every single time, she said, I still look back to see if that's her. And I said, well, tell me, why are you still in it? Why are you still doing what you're supposed to be doing? How are you holding fast to this hope? How are you holding fast to this confidence? And she said, because I know what He's done for me. She said, I can't explain what's going on. I can't explain what happened to this, why she done this and why she left. She said, but I know that He has never forsaken me. She said, I know that He has never left me alone. She said, I know how that He has been faithful to me in the past in my life. And while I cannot understand what is happening right now, I can trust in Him. These were the testimony of people who were looking in and they were thinking, I was not there whenever He raised Lazarus. I was not there when He healed the blind. I was not there whenever He made the lame to walk. I was not there to look inside the empty tomb, but I know what He did for me. These are people that whenever others look in upon their lives and they're like, how in the world can you continue to serve God after all that He's done to you? You have a peace that passes my understanding. And they look, and it's almost for the same side, they look out upon them and they say, you know what? I got a peace that I can't understand either. I don't know why I'm not lost in my mind. I don't know why I'm not a basket case. All things considered, I definitely should be, with what has gone on through life, with all of the trials, with all of the heartaches, with all of the betrayals that we face. I should be a basket case. But they're not. They're holding fast. There are times where holding fast means that you're just grabbed a hold of it and you're just holding on as tight as you can. Got your eyes closed, not looking around. There are other times where you're holding fast when you're down and you're praying and you're you're sick of how things are going. You're sick of the circumstances. And instead of sitting down whenever you're praying, you stand up and you clench your fists. Like, there's going to be some changes because I've got a hope. I've got somebody that stays with me. I've got somebody that has never left me. I know what He has done for me. There are things that I can look back on my life that I could tell you and you would never believe it. It wouldn't make no sense to you. It would have no value to you at all. But I know what He's done for me. I know how that He changed me. In my own life, as I look back upon my own life, my destiny is that I should be a drunk. If I was to follow the family tree, I should be a drunk. That was what was given down to me. That was what was shown to me and the whole time that I grew up in my home. I learned how to pour a mixed drink when I was 8 years old. I shouldn't be here. But there was a time where He'd come into my life and He changed me and He changed my destiny. He changed my eternity. He changed not just my eternity, but He changed me for where I should be here now. Gave me beautiful children, a beautiful wife, none of which I deserve. That is what hope is. Hope is whenever we can look back and we can hold on to it. We know that He's proven Himself faithful. And even in those times when fear comes in, when confusion comes in, when doubt comes in, when we're looking around and all the situation is dire, and we just close our eyes and we just grab a hold of that hope. Consider Jesus. The whole thing is to consider Jesus and that He is worthy of our hope. Thank you.